I'm going to do something a little unusual, but that's what makes life exciting for me, is doing stuff that hasn't been done before. I'm going to do sort of a spoken word performance off of a lecture by E. Cummings, one of the most revered poets in modern American memory. So this is from a really incredible book or lecture, whatever. It's a series of 6 lectures that he gave at Harvard, titled Six Non-Lectures, which are highly intimate, highly detailed, highly poeticized accounts of his life. It's an autobiography, basically, but they're taken to the fullest poetic and lyrical extent. It's one of those books I do recommend as many, it's one of the most amazing things I've ever read. It's just like Whale Nation. It's something that I feel blessed that during my very, very short, very limited time on this planet, I came across it, by chance or not by chance, assuming that assuming that there are such thing as coincidences. So I'm going to do the 3rd lecture, titled I and Self-Discovery. So I'm just going to do sort of a channeled emotional performance of this lecture. I feel it's very important to just emphasize the voice, the poetic parts of it. So if you forgive me, I will not be accompanying myself with an instrument or with background music. And I hope you enjoy. I don't think a lot of people will, but that's not what life is about. Life is about fulfilling it, not popularizing it, whatever you happen to be doing. So, I in Discovery, non-lecture 3 by E. Cummings, performed by John Bernys. In the course of my first non-lecture, I affirmed that, for me, personality is a mystery, that mysteries alone are significant, and that love is the mystery of mysteries who creates them all. During my second outspokenness, I contrasted the collective behavior of unchildren with the mystery of individuality, and gave, or attempted to give, you one particular child's earliest glimpse of a mystery called nature. Now, I shall try to communicate, clumsily no doubt, but honestly, certain attitudes and reactions surrounding the mystery of transition from which emerged a poet and painter named E. Cummings. As it was my miraculous fortune to have a true father and a true mother, and a home which the truth of their love made joyous. So, in reaching outward from this love, can I zoom in on this? All right, sorry. So, in reaching outward from this love and this joy, I was marvelously lucky to touch and seize a rising and striving world, a reckless world, filled with the curiosity of life herself, a vivid and violent world welcoming every challenge. A world worth hating and adoring and fighting and forgiving. In brief, a world which was a world. This inwardly immortal world of my adolescence recoils to its very roots whenever, nowadays, I see people who have been endowed with legs crawling on their chins after, quote, security, unquote, security. I marvel to myself, what is that? Something negative, undead, suspicious, and suspecting, an avarice and an avoidance, a self-surrendering meanness of withdrawal, a numerable complacency, and an innumerable cowardice. Who would be secure? Every and any slave. No free spirit ever dreamed of security. Or, if he did, he laughed. and lived to shame his dream. No whole sinless, sinful, sleeping, waking, breathing human creature ever was or could be brought by and sold for security. How monstrous and how feeble seems some unworld which would rather have its stew than eat its cake. Jehovah buried, Satan dead. Do fearless worship much and quick. Badness not being felt as bad. Itself thank goodness what is meek. Obey, says toe, submit, says tie. Eternity's a 5-year plan. Its joy with pain shall hang in hock. Who dares to call himself a man? For the benefit of any heretical members of my audience who do not regard manhood as a barbarous myth propagated by sinister powers envisaging the subjugation of womankind, let me, at this point, cheerfully risk a pair of perhaps not boring anecdotes. Back in the days of dog eat dog, my first anecdote begins. There lived a playboy whose father could easily have owned the original super skyscraper de Lou, a self-styled cathedral of commerce, endowed with every impetus of relaxation, not excluding ultra elevators which, on the laudable assumption that even machinery occasionally makes mistakes, were regularly tested. Testing an ultra elevator meant that its car was brought clean up, derived of safety devices, and dropped. As the car hurled downward, a column of air confined by the elevator shaft became more and more compressed until, assuming that nothing up toward happened, it broke the car's full completely. Or so I was told by somebody who should know. At any rate, young Mr. X was in the habit not only of attending these salubrious ceremonies, but of entering each about to be dropped car, and of dropping with it as far as long as the laws of the pre-Einsteinian universe permitted. Eventually, of course, somebody who shouldn't know telephoned a newspaper, which sent a reporter who, after scarcely believing his sense, asked the transcender of Adam point blank why he fell so often. Our playful protagonist shrugged his well tailored shoulders. For fun, he said simply, adding in a strictly confidential undertone, and it's wonderful for a hangover. Here I feel we have the we have the male American stance of my adolescence, or if you prefer, the adolescent American male stance of what some wit once nicknamed a lost generation. Whereof let me hastily append. The present speaker considers himself no worthy specimen. My point, however, isn't that many of us were even slightly heroic, and is that few of us declined to gamble. I don't think we enjoyed courting disaster. I do feel we liked being born. And now let me give you my second anecdote, which concerns, appropriately enough, not a single human being whose name I forget, but a millionary mishmash termed the public. Rather secretly, in New York City, an old college chum whom I hadn't beheld for decades appeared out of nowhere to tell me he was through with civilization. It seems that ever since Harvard, he'd been making, despite all sorts of panics and panicus, big money as an advertising writer, and this remarkable feat unutterably depressed him. After profound meditation, he concluded that America and the world which she increasingly dominated couldn't really be as bad as she and it looked through an advertising writer's eyes, and he promptly determined to seek another view, a larger view, in fact, the largest view obtainable. Bent on obtaining this largest obtainable view of America and America's world, my logical expel wangled an appointment with a subsidizer of a magazine, if magazine it may be called, possessing the largest circulation on earth, a periodical whose each emanation appears simultaneously in almost every existing human language. Our intrepid explorer then strengthened his tie, took 6 deep breaths, cleared his throat, swam right up, presented his credentials, and was politely requested to sit down. He sat down. Now listen, the subsidizer suggested. If you're thinking of working with us, you'd better know the three rules. And what, my friend cheerfully inquired, are the three rules? The three rules, explained his mentor, are first, 8 to 80. Second, anybody can do it. And third, makes you feel better. I don't quite understand, my friend confessed. Perfectly simple, his interlocutor assured him. Our first rule means that every article we publish must appeal to anybody, man, woman, or child, between the ages of 8 and 80 years. Is that clear? My friend said it was indeed clear. Second, his enlightener continued, every article we publish must convince any reader of the article that he or she could do whatever was done by the person about whom the article was written. Suppose, for instance, you were writing about Lindbergh, who had just flown the Atlantic Ocean for the first time in history, with nothing but unlimited nerve and a couple of chicken, or ham was it, sandwiches. Do you follow me? I'm ahead of you, my friend murmured. Remembering rule number 2, the sub went on. You'd impress upon your readers' minds over and over again the fact that, after all, there wouldn't have been anything extraordinary about Lindbergh if he hadn't been just a human being like every single one of them. See? I see, said my friend grimly. Third, the sub intoned, we'll imagine you're describing a record breaking Chinese flood, millions of poor, unfortunate men and women, and little children and helpless babies drowning and drowned. Millions more perishing of slow starvation, suffering inconceivable, untold agonies, and so forth. Well, any reader of this article must feel definitely and distinctly better when she or he finishes the article than when he or she began it. Sounds a trifle difficult, my friend hazarded. Don't be silly, the oracle admonished. All you've got to do when you're through with your horrors is to close by saying, but, thanks to an all merciful providence, we Americans, with our high standard of living and our Christian ideals, will never be subjected to such inhuman conditions as long as the stars and stripes triumphantly float over one nation indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Get me? I get you, said my disillusioned friend. Goodbye. So ends the second anecdote. You may believe it or not, as you wish, as far as I'm concerned. It's the unbelievable, but also unquestionable, self portrait of a 101% pseudo world in which truth has become televisionary, in which goodness means not hurting people, and in which beauty is sure, just or unjust, how any species of authentic individualism could stem from such a collective quagmire, I don't, as always, know. But here are 4 lines of a poem which didn't. While you and I have lips and voices which are for kissing and to sing with, who cares if some one-eyed son of a bitch invents an instrument to measure spring with? As regards my own self-finding, I have to thank first of all that institutions whose initial I flaunted unknowingly during my very earliest days. Officially, Harvard presented me with a smattering of languages and sciences, with a glimpse of Homer, and more than glimpse of Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes, and a deep glance at Dante and Shakespeare. Unofficially, she gave me my first taste of independence, and the truest friends any man will ever enjoy. The taste of independence came during my senior year when I was so lucky as to receive a room by myself in the yard. For living in the yard, receive a room by myself in the yard, for living in the yard was then an honor, not a compulsion, for this honor very properly reserved itself for seniors, who might conceivably properly reserved it, who might appreciate it. Hithero and I ostensibly lived at home, which meant that intimate contacts with the surrounding world were somewhat precious. Now I could roam that surrounding world sans pour, if not sans repro, and I lost no time in doing so. A town called Boston, thus observed, impressed my unsophisticated spirit as to the Mecca of all human endeavors. And be it added that, in this remote era, Boston had her points. Well, do I recall how our fat from hero, backed by the most physically imposing of his acquaintances, dared a stifling dump near Howard Street? Denominated Mother Shannons, and how we stopped short to avoid shredding on several spread-eagled sailors, and how my backer, with irreproachable nonchalance, exchanged a brace of dollar bills for 2 tumblers of something even viler than honest Jack Delaney served during soil descent prohibition. And finally, how, having merely sampled our non-beverages, we successfully attained Scully Square, to be greeted by the dispassionate drone of a pin-sized pimp, conspicuously stationed on the populous sidewalk under a blaze of movie bulbs and openly advertising 2 kinds of love for 25 cents each. Moreover, that distant Boston compromised such authentic incarnations of genius as Bernhard, whose each intonation prohibited demons and angels; Pavlova, who danced a ditty called Nix on the glowworm into the most absolute piece of aristocracy since Ming; and a lady of parts, around whose waist any man hand immediately dreamed it could go 3 times, named Polaire. Those were the days and nights of the turkey trot and the bunny hug, of everybody's doing it, Alexander's ragtime band. Has anybody here seen Kelly? There's a little bit of bad in every good little girl. On the banks of the Saskatchewan, and here comes my daddy now. Oh, pop, oh, pop, oh, pop, oh, pop. Nothing could exceed the artistry of Washington Street bartenders, who positively enjoyed constructing impeccable poo cafes in the midst of Ward 8s and hop toads. Nor could anything approach the courtesy of woodcock waiters, who never obeyed any ring but your own, and always knocked twice before entering. I am further indebted to Boston town for making me acquainted, and in no uncertain manner, with the sinister splendors of censorship. One evening, the old Howard would be as is; the next, you guessed you were embracing a funeral, when Miss Gertrude Hoffman brought her lissome self and her willowy girls to Boston. They and she were violently immersed in wrist and ankle length underwear. A local tobacconist drew jail for selling a box of cigars adorned with the usually gruzzily apparelled but unmistakably symbolic females, and vainly did an outraged lawyer object that his client was happily married. Meanwhile, watching and warding Miss Summers' matchless collection of indecent items constituted a favorite topic of conversation with high and low alike. But if the predations of Puritanism astonished me nearly 40 years ago, I was recently more than amazed to learn that you cannot now show a woman's entire breast in any American movie house unless she isn't, to coin a plagiarism, white. Verily, democracy, unquote, is a strange disease. Nor, I submit, can any human being help sympathizing, in his or her heart of hearts, with the bad bald poet who sings, "Come, all you mischief hatchers, hatch mischief, all you. Guilty scamper, you bastards throw dynamite, let knowing's magic with bright credos, each divisible fool, like imitate gossip, fear, unlife, meanness, and to succeed in not dying. His will still occur, birds disappear, becomingly a thunderbolt compose poems, not because harm symmetry, earthquakes, starfish, but because nobody can sell the moon to the moon. Let us now consider friendship." Through Harvard, I met Schofield Thayer, and at Harvard, Sibley Watson, 2 men who subsequently transformed a degooting periodical called The Dial into a first-rate magazine of the fine arts, and together fought the eternal fight of selfhood against mobism, the immortal battle of beauty against ugliness. It would not even slightly surprise me to learn that most of you have remained till now quite unaware of the existence of these literally heroic individuals and of their actually unparalleled achievement. Never have I seen courage and courtesy, taste and intelligence, prodigious patience and incredible generosity quite so jealously mistrusted or so basely misprinted or so savagely detested as by the dial's detractors. Even today, more than 20 years after this true and noble adventure's culmination, the adventure's chastisement continues through such a conspiracy of silence on the part of America's intellectual gangsters as would be ludicrous if it were not abominable. Nor will that chastisement begin to diminish while general good outflanks minute particulars and spiritual treachery is the order of the unday. At Harvard, moreover, I met Stuart Mitchell, who soon became editor in chief at our university's only serious undergraduate magazine, The Monthly, and was subsequently managing editor of The Dial. John Dos Passos, through those devoted efforts, a dangerous compilation known as the Eight Harvard Poets appeared, and S. Foster Damon, who opened my eyes and ears not merely as Domenico Theotokopoulos and William Blake, but to all ultra at the moment modern music and poetry and painting. Nor can or do I forget Theodore Miller, who gladly brought me such treasures at the exquisite French. La Bunatar Ani, Nis Pietas Moron, of Horace and Sappho's magically luminous invocation, but the token of whose most memorable kindness was a volume combining poems and letters by that glorious human being who confessed, I am certain of nothing but of the holiness of the heart's affections and the truth of imagination. Whereupon, deep in those heights of psychic sky which had greeted my boyish escape from moralism, an unknown and unknowable bird began singing. That's very beautiful. Just a side note. After Harvard, I thank for self-discovery, a phenomenon and miracle. The phenomenon was a telemicroscopic chimera born of the satanic rape of matter by mind, a phallic female phantasm clothed in thunderous anonymity and adorned with colloquially floating spiderwebs of traffic. A stark, irresistibly stupendous newness, mercifully harboring among its pitilessly premeditated, spontaneous, immemorial races and nations. By God, I want above 14th. Fifth's deep purring biceps, the mystic screeches of Broadway, the trivial stink of rich frail from asinine life. I paint for what's below, the singer wall I want, the perpendicular lips of insane teeth, the vertical grin. Give me the square in spring, the little barbarous Grenwick perfumed fake, and most the futile fooling labyrinth where noisy colors stole, and the baboon sniggering insipidus while I sit, sipping singular insets as one opaque big girl jiggles thickly hips to the canoon. But Hassan chuckles seeing the Greeks breathe. In New York City, I also breathed. And as if for the first time, the truly first of first times was, however, still to come. It arrived with a so called war, being neither warrior nor conscientious subjector, saint nor hero. I embarked for France as an ambulance driver, and as my earliest taste of independence had been excelled by the banquet which I later sampled among Manhattan's skyscrapers, so was the banquet surpassed by the freedom which I now tasted. Paris. This April sunset completely utters serenity, silently a cathedral, before whose upward lean, magnificent face the streets turn young with rain. Two realms elsewhere innately hostile, here cordially coexisted, each by its very distinctness intensifying the other. Nor could I possibly have imagined either of loveliness so fearlessly of the moment, or so nobly beautiful a timelessness. 3,000 oceanic missiles away from some terrestrial years before, a son of New England had observed those realms bitterly struggling for dominion. Then, as a guest of verticality, our Impuritan had attended the overwhelming triumph of the temporal realm. Now, I participated in an actual marriage of material with immaterial things. I celebrated an immediate reconciling of spirit and flesh, forever and now, heaven and earth. Paris was for me precisely and complexly this homogeneous duality, this accepting transcendence, this living and dying more than death of life. Whereas by the very act of becoming its improbably gigantic self, New York had reduced mankind to a tribe of pygmies. Paris, in each shape and gesture and avenue and cranny of her being, was continuously expressing the humanness of humanity. Everywhere I sensed a miraculous presence, not of mere children and women and men, but of living human beings, and the fact that I could scarcely understand their language seemed irrelevant, since the truth of our momentarily mutual aliveness created an imperishable communion. While, at the hating touch of some madness called La Guerre, a once rising and striving world toppled into withering hideously smithereens. Love rose in my heart like a sun, and beauty blossomed in my life like a star. Now, finally and first, I was myself, a temporal citizen of eternity, one with all human beings, born and unborn. Thus, through an alma mater whose scholastic bounty appeared the smallest of her blessings, and by way of those even more magnificent institutions of learning, New York and Paris, our ignoramus reaches his supreme indebtedness. Last but most, I thank for myself finding certain beautiful givers of illimitable gladness, whose any mystery makes every man's flesh put space on and his mind take off time. And